They say that betrayal from the enemy wounds the flesh, but betrayal from family? It cuts the soul. I found out that my brother's wife was having an affair with my father the same day I gave up my rights to the company I helped build. If this sounds like a Greek tragedy, you're right. Except that I didn't just watch it unfold. I lived through it. My name is Marcus Rains. I am 37 years old, and until recently, I considered myself an heir to a legacy. 3 generations of Rains men built our family company from the ground up. My grandfather, Calvin Rains, started with a handful of tools, a dirty garage, and a knack for solving mechanical problems that no one else wanted to touch. My father, Thomas Rains, took that talent and built an empire on it. Rains Engineering and Holdings, a multi-million-dollar enterprise that did everything from construction to infrastructure development throughout the Northeast. And me? I had to develop it all further. I was the next link in the chain. I started at the bottom not because I had to, but because I insisted on it. I was 22 years old when I first put on my branded overalls, with a name patch and everything. I had spent 5 years sweating under machines, crawling in stuffy tunnels, sitting up sleepless nights to meet deadlines that only crazy people would agree to. I didn't just want the company. I wanted to earn it. And I earned it. Project after project, deal after deal. When I turned 30, I was a vice president responsible for 2/3 of the company's operations. My father was still the CEO, but he started handing over meetings, clients, and even strategic decisions to me. I thought I was being prepared for leadership. It turned out that I was being prepared for something else, a complete breakup. The truth is that I gave my life to the company. And I mean that literally. Just ask my ex-wife. Her name was Emily. We met in college. She studied art history. I studied business and engineering. Complete opposites, but somehow we worked. At first, she liked my determination, my drive. I liked her calmness, her warmth. She said she felt safe with me, as if the future was something she could count on. But over time, everything changed. I missed dinners, then anniversaries. Eventually, I was missing entire weekends. I told myself that it was just a phase, that when I got high enough, I would be able to breathe easy. But the truth was that there was always one more step to climb. It took longer than I expected. In fact, for years. But for so long you can only come home to an empty bed and cold food. The last straw? I missed the opening of her gallery. Her first solo exhibition. She invited everyone. Her parents, her friends, and me. And I never showed up. I was stuck in Chicago, closing a deal with Crestford, the very deal my father would later praise me for in front of the board of directors. When I returned, she was gone. She left a note on the kitchen table. You chose your father. You chose the company. I will not be a third choice. In the letter, she was not angry. She was just tired, exhausted, and she was right. I didn't even fight the divorce. I didn't ask for anything. I just signed the papers and let her go. That was 5 years ago. I haven't dated anyone seriously since then. What's the point of that? The only time I loved someone, I sacrificed her on the altar of my father's ambitions. And for what? So he could turn around and gut me like a fish? The Grandview Hotel. The name alone makes me sick to my stomach. Our firm was one of his key investors. The location was terrible for our needs. It was almost an hour's drive from my father's office and even further from his home. We had dozens of closer locations with better amenities and less traffic. But somehow Grandview kept showing up on his calendar. A meeting with a client, he said. A private dinner. Important conversation. And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? After all, he was the CEO. He also had a nasty habit of distracting me with last-minute site inspections or client checks when it was time for one of those meetings in Grandview. Always urgent. Always time-sensitive. I didn't question it. I was used to my father being eccentric. But looking back, I see a pattern. And what's the strangest thing? He started taking Claire with him. Claire has a good nose for presentations. He told me once when I asked why she was coming with us to a proposed investor meeting. She helped soften the negotiations. The day this happened was almost offensively ordinary. I remember because I was wearing a light blue tie that my ex-wife had bought me. The one that she said made my eyes bulge for some reason. I still wore it on big days, important meetings, presentations, or negotiations. A small superstition, perhaps. A piece of sentimentality from a marriage that collapsed under the weight of my ambition. It was a Wednesday, in the middle of the week. No warning. While I was in an important meeting, I received a call from my assistant, Lila, saying that my father wanted to see me. She sounded uneasy. It was like she already knew. I was worried, but not scared. His office hadn't changed in decades. The same oak desk. The same wall with certificates and outdated family photos. A man of heritage, tradition, and control. He was standing there when I walked in, all businesslike, with his eyes bulging. "Sit down, Marcus." I sat down. He didn't waste any time. "I've decided to hand over the management of our company to Roman. Starting right now. If betrayal is a storm, then what followed was a flood. I wish I could say that I handled it with dignity. That I left my father's office with dignity. With my head held high, a calm nod, some stoic monosyllable about respect or heritage. But I didn't. I sat there for a long time after he said those words. I just tried to breathe, trying to understand when the floor gave way beneath me. It wasn't just the title. It wasn't even about betrayal. It was that everything I had built my identity on, the company, my role in my family, my value, had been swept out from under me by the very people I had built it all for. That night I went home and stared at the wall for 3 hours. No TV, no music, only silence. And the longer I sat there, the more something dark began to rise inside me. A slow, simmering rage. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was theft. My father had stolen something sacred, my future, my purpose, and handed it over to my incompetent brother and a woman who looked at me as if I were nothing more than a stepping stone she had already crushed under her heels. I did not agree with my father's decision. I did not accept it. And I damn sure wasn't going to forgive him. He wanted to bury me quietly. He wanted me to disappear with a severance package and a smile. But I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. He had underestimated me, as they all do. The next morning I woke up early. Muscle memory. I went through my usual routine, shower, suit, black coffee, and looked at my schedule. And then I remembered, I didn't have a schedule anymore. One that would matter. I didn't have a morning meeting. I wasn't presenting the quarterly report to the board. I wasn't leading the Crestview expansion team. But I went anyway. I walked right into the building as if nothing had changed. I nodded to the security guard. I took the elevator to the top floor. And there they were, Roman, sitting in my old chair, and Claire, sitting on the armrest like a fucking queen. "Marcus," Roman said, flashing the practiced blank smile he always put on when he didn't know what to say. "I didn't expect to see you." "I see," I replied, my voice icy. Claire didn't say anything. She just studied me, as she always did. Measuring me. Calculating. I didn't stay long. Just long enough to look around the office that had once been mine and let reality sink in. My name was gone from the door. My files were stacked in a box in the corner. My father moved on faster than I thought possible. I left before I did something I regretted later. But when I left the building, something inside me was petrified. If they thought I would leave quietly, they were wrong all these years. I was not just angry. I wanted revenge. And I was going to take it one cruel, calculated piece at a time. When I was a child, my father used to say, "If you want to know the truth, follow the paper trail." This was his answer to everything from questionable subcontractors to missing inventory. I used to think it was just one of those whimsical datisms he liked to throw around. But he was right. And now I was going to use that wisdom against him. After dinner, I didn't sleep. Again, this was starting to become a theme. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling fan spinning above me as if it held the answers, as if it could explain how a man betrays both his sons in one move. Roman, the clueless golden child, had inherited the company I had built with blood, blisters, and 16-hour days. And my father? He gave it away as a consolation prize to the man whose wife he was vacationing with in hotel rooms. I couldn't get Claire's smile out of my head. That smooth, polished smile she wore when she sipped her wine. Before, I had thought she was superficial, perhaps a little pretentious. Now I knew she was something worse, meaner and more calculating. Claire wasn't just cheating on Roman. She was playing with all of us. She wrapped herself around our heritage and wore it like a pearl necklace. And my father? He was just another rich, arrogant old man with a zipper problem and a god complex. And yet, there was nothing I could do about it. Not yet. No evidence. No confession. No leverage. But I still had one thing. Access. You see, while Roman paraded around in his new CEO chair as if he had earned it, no one revoked my administrative authority. I still had internal access to company files, calendars, expense reports, corporate travel logs, everything. Because I was still a consultant. That was their first mistake. On Monday morning, I showed up at the headquarters as if nothing had happened. I even brought donuts. I smiled at the secretary. I waved to the floor manager. I pretended that I wasn't mentally sharpening a knife behind my teeth. Roman, of course, took a large corner office. He added some stupid motivational posters and a framed quote from Elon Musk. I didn't even try to go in there. He was probably still learning how to use the coffee machine. I went up to the second floor, where my old office was. No one had touched it. My sign was still hanging on the door. My photographs were still on the shelf, including a photo of my ex-wife, which I immediately turned face down. Then I locked the door, pulled out my laptop, and got to work. The first thing I looked at was the Grandview Hotel. I pulled up all the expense records labeled Outbound Business Hospitality for the past year. Most of them were boring: lunches for clients, team dinners, travel reimbursements. But Grandview? This place was lit up like a Christmas tree. It appeared more than 24 times in 6 months. Each of them was registered to Thomas Raines or Claire Raines as entertainment for clients or preparation for a presentation. Bullshit. Bullshit. Claire didn't work with clients. She was Roman's wife, not an employee. She had no official position. The company didn't pay for spouses to attend off-site meetings, unless there was a reason to pretend they were attending. I checked the dates with my own calendar. Almost every time they were in Grandview, I was sent to an inconvenient location. Connecticut, Pittsburgh, Jersey City during a snowstorm. I opened the messages and scrolled through them. There they were, all the Marcus, can you cover this test? Messages. All the messages from my father. Sorry, I need you on site for this. He kept me away. He was managing it. He created gaps in the narrative so that I wouldn't start connecting the dots. But now I was connected. I was fully awake. The next step was security. I called a guy named Drew. He was one of our video surveillance contractors. We used him to temporarily install cameras during high-risk construction projects. Drew, I said, I need you to do me a favor. Be quiet. No reports, no official paperwork. He hesitated. What kind of favor? Can you pull the footage from the Grandview Hotel? Internal cameras in the hallway. 3rd floor. For the last 3 months. Do you have access? I'll get it, I said. Just be ready when I call. He agreed, reluctantly. I could hear it in his voice. But I had leverage. I had helped him cover up a mistake on the documentation for one important facility that had saved him from being fired 2 years ago. It was time to get the money. That night I went to Grandview again. This time, not to spy. Just to look around. I walked through the lobby as if I belonged there. I nodded to the concierge. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. And there it was. Room 317. I stared at the room as if it could speak to me. Claire had stayed there twice, according to the records. Once with a presentation team. Once by herself. Both times with my father's signature. I looked around. There were no cameras in the corridor, but in the elevators? Of course there were. What if I could record Claire and my father arriving together several times? That would be something. Not enough to disclose, but enough to push. That night I went home and poured myself a drink. I sat down in the dark with my laptop glowing like a confessional. I opened a file. I titled it, Unforeseen Circumstances. I inserted screenshots inside. Receipts from Grandview. Claire's name. My father's name. Calendar entries. Text messages. Traveler's notes. It wasn't airtight. Not yet. But it was being built. And I was just getting started. I didn't want to burn the company to the ground. Not yet. But what if they kept pushing me out? What if they kept pretending that I didn't matter? Then they would have seen what Raines could do when he was let go. It was no longer just about betrayal. It was about clearing my name. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. Not because I was healed, but because I finally knew how I was going to hurt them back. The next morning, I stood at the bathroom sink with a razor in my hand, the foam stuck to my face. I stared into the mirror, and for the first time in years, I didn't recognize the man looking back at me. The beard had grown coarser. The eyes sharper. The anger, calmer. Not explosive, as before, but cold, calculating. The anger that turns architects into arsonists. And I was no longer here to build. I was here to destroy. I didn't go to the office that day. Instead, I drove across town to a cafe I used to frequent before my life became one of boardrooms and concrete. I sat down by the window with my laptop open and started looking through my internal correspondence. Emails, calendar events, payment orders, employee logs, anything that could shed more light on what was really going on at Raines Engineering now that the puppet and puppeteer had taken control of the company. I cross-checked every trip to Grandview with the corporate card. Every time my father and Claire came, the company paid the bills. And every time, My father conveniently put Roman's name on the bill as an attendee. The few times Roman did appear on the records, Claire was not present. She came only when Roman was not present. It was a paper trail of pretense. But paper was not enough. I needed something tangible. A witness. And there was one name that kept appearing in the hotel records. A clerk named Serena. She checked them in more than once. I found her LinkedIn page. Then her Instagram. Then a tagged photo of her at a bar 3 blocks from the hotel. That night I went there. I didn't approach her right away. I waited until she was done chatting with her friends and slipped out onto the smoking patio. She lit a cigarette with a trembling hand and looked at nothing. I slowly approached her so that my hands could be seen, my tone calm. Serena. She turned around, alert. Yes. I don't want this to sound weird. My name is Marcus. I work for Rains Engineering. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just trying to understand something. You're that guy, she said after a moment, narrowing her eyes. The older brother. Claire's brother-in-law. That's how they talked about me. Interesting. I don't want to put you in danger, I said. But I need to ask you something about Claire and Thomas Rains. About Grandview. She hesitated, chewing on the inside of her lip. If this is some tabloid crap. It's not, I interjected. They've destroyed lives. And they're not done yet. If you saw something, anything that can confirm what's going on, I need your help. Her eyes softened a little. She looked down, exhaled. They were always together. Always. And not like, professionally together. Like, she stopped, sighed. Have you ever seen a man twice her age hold her in an unfriendly way in an elevator going up to her room, knowing that she was his son's wife? Because I have. That was the end. The last crack in the dam. Will you testify? No, she said. But if you want to make a statement off the record, I could help. Especially if it means someone finally puts that snake in a cage. I thanked her, gave her my number, and left feeling energized. I had the first living piece of the puzzle. Someone who had seen them together, up close, in public. It was a start. But exposing them was no longer enough. I didn't just want my father to fall. I wanted him to see the wreckage before he hit the ground. I wanted Roman to look into the same abyss into which I had been thrown, and for him to realize that it had a name. His wife. That weekend, I rented a car and drove to New Haven. Not for a vacation. Not for nostalgia. But to visit Emily. It had been many years. Too many years. But she was the only one who saw me before all this. Before I became the man my father molded. Before I buried myself in concrete and subjugation. She opened the door after a long pause. The same soft eyes. The same grace in her movements. But she was different. Lighter. Like someone who had finally exhaled after years of holding her breath. Marcus, she said softly, her face flashing with surprise. What are you doing here? I had no prepared speech. Just a question. Do you remember the last thing you said to me? She nodded slowly. I told you I wouldn't be your third choice. I will never forget that. She stepped aside. You'd better come in. We sat on her porch, the wind rustling the dry leaves, and I told her everything. About Roman. About Claire. About my father. And then I told her the truth about why I had come. I need someone who sees things clearly. Someone I trust. I don't know what I'm turning into, Emily. But I know I can't do it alone. She studied me for a long time and then said something I didn't expect. You're not doing this for revenge. Not at all. You're doing this because you think it's the only way you can become important again. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. Because she was right. She reached out and squeezed my hand. Then do it. Burn him if you have to. Just don't let it consume you. That night, I drove back under a sky full of stars I didn't deserve to see. Her words rang in my head like a warning and a blessing. Monday came quickly. I went back to work. But this time, I stopped at the 3rd floor, the IT department. I walked in as if I owned the place. Technically, I still did, at least on paper. I struck up a friendly conversation with Leo, one of the senior tech managers I'd promoted a few years ago. Still keeping our data warehouse more secure than Fort Knox? I asked. He smiled. Of course I do. Why? No reason, I replied, pausing. But if I wanted to check the logs of corporate travel authorizations, just for fun, what would it look like? Leo laughed. Officially? Paperwork. Unofficially? Coffee in 5 minutes. I walked away with a fresh login and a timestamped report showing Thomas and Claire's overlapping trips. All I had to do was wait for the right moment to blow it up. That day, Claire showed up at my office. Uninvited. No warning. No apology. Marcus, she said, closing the door behind her with a click. We need to talk. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Of course we do. I know what you're doing. Enlighten me. You're trying to ruin everything. My marriage. My company. Your own family. My family destroyed itself, I replied, my voice steady. I'm just pulling back the curtain. She came closer, lowering her voice. If you keep doing this, Marcus, people are going to get hurt. Not just the people you want to hurt. Everyone. I looked her in the eye. Okay. She paused, something flickering behind those perfect lashes. Something like fear. You don't know what you're playing with, she said. No, Claire, I whispered. You don't. She walked away without another word. I watched her go and knew that was only the beginning. I had broken down the door. Now I was going to rip it off its hinges. And when the dust settled, no one would mistake silence for surrender. The report from Leo lay in front of me like a loaded weapon. 53 entries. That's how many times my father's credentials had accessed travel expense logs, personal calendar updates, and client routing forms, all with a link to outbound event planning at the Grandview Hotel, and more. The company paid for out-of-state trips to vacation resorts, disguised as business trips. Some of them used Claire's name directly. Some didn't even bother to put a legend on it. And now I had receipts. Metaphorically and literally. I leaned back and stared at the screen, letting the glow burn my eyes. I wasn't breathing hard. My heart wasn't pounding. But a fire began to smolder inside me again, this time quieter. It was controlled. I didn't just want to end them. I wanted to abolish them. First the reputation, then the legacy. And the last thing my father cared about was control. But for all this to work, I had to act surgically. I couldn't go straight to Roman. Not yet. He wouldn't believe me until he saw everything with his own eyes, on his own terms. He loved Claire too much. He trusted our father too much. No, he needed the truth to find him. So I laid the first crumb. It started with a printed report. 1 page long. Redacted so that it was vague, but at the bottom, Claire's name was in bold under the heading Unverified Individuals Present at a Confidential Management Meeting. I folded it up, put it in an unmarked envelope, and tossed it on Roman's desk at the end of the day. No return address. No fingerprints. Just a message written in thick marker. Watch who you're sitting next to. I didn't stay to see his reaction. There was no need. The seed had been planted. Now all I had to do was water it. The next morning, I ordered a company car in my name and logged it as a client escort. I knew Roman would see this. According to protocol, all cases of using vehicles in the Rains name had to be reported to the CEO's office. Another legacy policy, courtesy of dear old dad. Let him wonder where I was going. Let him wonder what I knew. Let him start pulling strings. I went to Westbridge not on business, but to talk. There was one person there who understood the rot that was spreading in the company. Someone who was watching from behind the scenes in the boardroom, too experienced to be fooled by smiles and too political to intervene without cause. Her name was Cassandra Merrick, one of the first women to join the board of directors of Rains Holdings, the former CFO of one of our first construction subsidiaries, a woman my father alternately feared and respected. She retired 3 years ago, officially. Unofficially, she still had lunch with the chairman of the board every other Thursday. I went to her house with coffee, a bottle of Glenlivet, and a stack of printouts. When she opened the door and saw me, her eyebrows furrowed as if I were a memory she hadn't decided to love yet. Marcus, I need you to do me a favor. You look terrible. Fine, I replied. Then I'm halfway to being consistent with how I feel. She let me in. Her house smelled of tobacco and lemon oil. She didn't waste time on small talk, just poured 2 glasses of scotch I had brought and sat down across from me like a general preparing to analyze a battlefield. I laid out the main points, Claire, my father, the hotel, the time of my departure. She didn't bat an eye. I always told Thomas that sentimentality would be his undoing, she said, sipping the amber liquid. But I never thought he would fall in love with his daughter-in-law. That's even worse, I said. He didn't just fall in love. He gave her the company through Roman. She is the force behind the curtain. Roman thinks he's in charge, but he's just another suit holding her purse. And you? I want to break that illusion. She tilted her head curiously. You want your seat back? I want the truth to come out. Wherever the wreckage falls, so be it. Cassandra leaned back. Her eyes narrowed. Do you have any leverage? A little. Enough to make it bleed. She took a sip, then nodded slowly. Then let's make them bleed. We talked for over an hour. Cassandra suggested that she speak carefully to 2 board members, people who still respected my grandfather's legacy and who were skeptical of Roman's sudden promotion. Not to start a coup. Not yet. But to prepare the ground. I'm going to plant the idea that the company is facing a quiet ethical crisis, she said. Make it an issue of responsibility, not morality. That's what will get the board members moving. That day, I left her house with a new ally. Someone who didn't want to get her hands dirty, but would gladly let me make a mess, as long as she could point it out to me and say, "I told you so." By the end of the week, I had completed the second stage of evidence collection. This time, I didn't just rely on paper trails. I hired someone. Her name was Nina, a private investigator with a clean record and experience in corporate surveillance. A former FBI agent. Sharp eye. No questions asked. "I need you to confirm what I already know," I told her. "Keep an eye on Claire. Watch my father. Don't get involved. Don't get caught. I need photos, times, places. Everything." She nodded as if she'd heard it all before. "Give me a week. I'll give you 10,000. Her eyes didn't blink. "Then I'll give you the proof." Meanwhile, I went back to the building. I didn't go out in public. I had lunch with old colleagues. I walked around the production hall. I spoke at a supplier conference. The man who was pushed out was now more visible than ever. Let them wonder why. Let them feel the tension in every handshake. On Thursday, Roman finally couldn't take it anymore. He cornered me in the corridor of the management office, his face pale and sweaty, and he was holding an anonymous envelope. "Do you know anything about this?" I raised an eyebrow. "Should I?" He shoved it at me. It was on my desk. No signature. No explanation. "Sounds serious," I said, glancing at the page. "Looks like some kind of internal audit log." "Marcus." His voice broke. "Tell me the truth." "About what?" "About Claire. About Dad." People are whispering. I let the silence drag on a little longer. Then I sighed and put my hand on his shoulder. "Roman, sometimes the worst thing is not finding out the truth. It's the realization that you ignored the signs." He pulled away as if my touch had burned him. "I don't believe that." "You will," I said softly. "Sooner than you think." That night I received a call from Nina. "You were right," she said. "Your father and Claire have checked into the Marion Tower Hotel in Stamford. Room 904. Together. I have photos." She sent them to me. And here it is. My father, wearing a tailored suit, his arm around Claire's back as they entered the hotel lobby. Claire, laughing at what he whispered, running her fingers over his chest as if it were instinct. 2 days before the company's ethics committee met for the quarterly report. I didn't feel happy. Not satisfaction. Not yet. But I felt something close to it. Control. The next morning, I printed out the photos, put them in an envelope, and addressed it to Roman Reigns, the CEO of Reigns Engineering and Holdings. No return address. No note this time. Just the truth. Cold, high resolution, and undeniable. The next day, Roman didn't show up for work. This alone was enough to make people whisper. The man who had just started his job suddenly started working from home, and Claire? Claire was all smiles, too bright, too fake. But I knew. The envelope had landed. I imagined Roman sitting in his office, with the blinds closed, flipping through photos he couldn't explain where they came from. His father's. His wife. The entrance to the hotel. The timestamp in bold. Reality printed with perfect clarity. And then the realization that I knew. That I had allowed him to look me in the eye while he sat on a throne built on betrayal. And yet, I never heard from him. Not a phone call. Not a message. Not even a door slam. Which meant only one thing. He was spiraling downward. I went about my day as if nothing had changed. Nina sent me another piece of news. Claire and Thomas had moved to more inconspicuous places, smaller hotels, other counties. They tried to lay low. But it was too late. The damage was not just done. Everything secret was starting to come out. I didn't need more photos. I needed the right audience. So I planned a legacy luncheon. An informal get-together for a few senior employees, some board veterans, and a few middle managers who still had influence in the company. I presented it as a morale boost to honor the company's roots and the vision that built it. The irony was lovely. I hosted it in the North Tower Conference Room, named after my grandfather. I decorated it with old photos of construction sites, articles from our early days, and one of Reigns' first uniforms, a blue uniform, patched, stained, and proudly displayed in a glass case. The nostalgia hit hard. People were talking, sharing memories, joking about the pre-Wi-Fi days. And then, when the event was coming to an end, I gave a short speech. It was short and to the point. Heritage, I said, is not just something we inherit. It is what we protect. It's what we don't let rot. I could see Cassandra Merrick nodding in the back of the room, her glass still, unmoving, unreadable. After the speech, several people came up to shake my hand. Some just looked at me, raised eyebrows, silent understanding. They were with me. Perhaps not out loud. Maybe not in writing. But the momentum was changing. The next morning, Roman returned. His eyes were bloodshot. His tie was crooked. Claire was gone. He went straight to his office without saying a word. The door closed. No meetings. No briefings. Just hours of silence. I waited. And, sure enough, at 11:42 a.m., the phone on my desk rang. Rains. I picked up the phone slowly. Marcus. His voice was thin. Come here. I didn't answer. I just hung up and walked down the hall. The door was open. I went inside. He was sitting at a table, my table once, and he looked smaller. Like a boy who put on his father's suit and realized it didn't fit him. The photographs were on the table in front of him, laid out like a crime scene. He did not look up. How long? He asked. 8 months, at least, I answered. Maybe longer. He ran his hand through his hair. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Would you have believed me? Silence. You let me marry her. I shook my head. You were already married when I found out. He finally looked up. His eyes were not angry. They were empty. I loved her, he said, his voice breaking. I know, I replied. And she loved the crown you wore. Roman leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Dad, do you think he's in love with her? No, I answered categorically. He's in love with control. Claire was just the most convenient tool. He didn't argue. We sat in that silence for a long time. Like brothers. Not friends. Not enemies. Just two men who were used in different ways by the same puppeteer. What should I do now? He finally asked. I almost smiled. You lead. He frowned. I don't know how to drive. Yes, you do, I said. But not when you're under his thumb. What do you suggest? I reached into my briefcase and placed the folder on his desk. Everything is inside, financial documents, schedules, employee testimonies, ready to go. It's enough for the board to put Thomas on temporary leave while we investigate. Roman blinked. You have already prepared this? I looked at him. He knew the answer. He opened the folder, flipped through it. His hands were shaking. If I do this, you'll get your life back, I said. You will stop being a substitute for your father and become a real leader, not just a name in a glass office. Roman looked at me almost pleadingly. Will you help me? I stopped. It was that very moment. A crossroads. I could have said no. Let him drown. Watch him fall like I did. But I didn't want to destroy Roman. I don't want to destroy anyone else. Only our father. I'll help, I said. Deal. The next 48 hours were a blur. Roman called a special meeting of the board of directors on the grounds of management misconduct and possible ethical violations. He used the wording I had given him. Nothing too incriminating, but enough to send the legal and PR departments into a quiet panic. Meanwhile, Claire had disappeared. Not from the company, but from the spotlight. She started calling in sick, working remotely, doing everything she could to avoid being seen, and asked unnecessary questions. Thomas? He was silent. He was too quiet. He never contacted me. That meant one thing. He was planning something. I found out what it was on Thursday afternoon. Leo, my man in IT, sent me an access report with a note. Thomas Raines. Remote login. Administrative panel. File, consultant access termination. My father tried to wipe me off the map. Even now, when the walls are crumbling, he still reaches for the control lever. Still trying to close doors, lock files, burn bridges. I smiled when I saw this. Because it meant that he knew. It meant he was afraid. But I didn't wait. Before the order went through, I entered Roman's office, closed the door behind me, and said, it's time. Already. I threw a flash drive on his desk. It's all here, photos, expense logs, the hotel receptionist report, timestamps, the entire network. Show this to the board, and they'll have no choice. Roman stared at it as if it were radioactive. Then he took it. I left the room without saying another word. 2 hours later, I got a call. It was from Cassandra. He's out. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. And Roman? He's with us. As acting CEO. I nodded. Thank you. There's one more thing, she added. Thomas asked about you. Where? In the boardroom. He needs your 10 minutes. The conference room was cold. I walked in and saw that he was already sitting with his arms folded on the table as if nothing had happened. He looked at me not angry, not ashamed, just tired. You made such a mess here, he said. No, I replied. I made the mess. I just refuse to keep sweeping it under the rug. He sighed. You've always been dramatic, and you always thought you were untouchable. He leaned back, his eyes narrowed. What do you want, Marcus? An apology? A confession? I want you to admit it. He raised an eyebrow. Admit what? That you betrayed us. He was silent for a long time. Then he stood up, walked to the window, and stared at the horizon. When I built this company, he said slowly, I swore that nothing could destroy it. Not politics. Not competitors. Not even my family. You know what kills empires, Marcus? Loyalty. Loyalty to the wrong people. Blood. Legacy. He turned, his face harder than stone. I gave Claire what she wanted because she was useful, because she saw the cracks and filled them. The novel was never strong enough. And you? He paused. You were very much like me. I'm nothing like you, I said. He smiled slightly. Keep telling yourself that. I took a step forward. This is not the end, I said, but it is the beginning of your downfall. You will see how the company will survive without you. You will see your name disappear from the forms. And maybe one day you'll understand what it's like to be erased. He stared at me. For the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not anger, not contempt, but recognition. Then I turned and walked out, leaving him alone in the room. The next day, Thomas Raines did not return to the office. Officially, he was on sick leave. That's how Roman's new assistant, Roman, carefully typed up a memo with a cautious vagueness of corporate policy. Unofficially, everyone knew the truth. The king had been deposed, but the kingdom was not at peace. The board was tense, watching Roman like a hawk. The employees were polite but uncertain. And Claire went from absent to omnipresent. She appeared in every conversation in the corridor, in every elevator ride together. She smiled. She asked questions. She made suggestions, as if challenging the building. I knew that look. It was the same look my father had when he first fired someone to prove a point. And she wasn't bluffing. 2 days after Thomas was fired, Roman called me into his office. He looked thin, pale, exhausted. She wants a divorce, he said without preamble. I sat down slowly. Claire. He nodded. She said she needs to reinvent herself. She said it had nothing to do with Dad. Do you believe her? He didn't answer. Instead, he put a legal document on the table. A divorce agreement. Claire's name at the top. Her lawyer's signature at the bottom. She wants to keep the house, he said. And the beachfront property. That's half the property. I know. She's walking with your blood, Roman. I know, he said again, softer this time. But if I fight her, if this goes public. He didn't need to finish. The Raines name had already taken enough of a beating. A messy divorce would be another match falling on a field of dry grass. I leaned forward. There is a way to stop her. He looked up. Don't settle. Dig. He shook his head. She'll have lawyers. PR consultants. She'll bury me. Then let me get dirty for you. Roman hesitated. You're already on thin ice with the board. If they find out you're interfering in my divorce. They won't. I don't need the board's permission to expose a liar. He was silent for a long time. Then he nodded slightly. And just like that, we were together again. That evening I called Nina. Tighten the net, I told her. I need everything about Claire. Her finances. Her relationships. Her contacts. Don't just follow her. Dissect her. Is there a particular lead you want me to start with? Start with the prenup. Claire insisted on it before she married Roman. It was sold as modern transparency at the time. Roman thought it was romantic, proof that she didn't want his money. But that was before she knew how high the Raines' fortune would go. I didn't trust anything this woman touched, including contracts. The next time Nina showed up was more than a week later. She met me at our usual place, but this time without the folder. Just a flash drive and a look that said, "You're going to want to sit down." I connected it to my laptop and we got into my car under the soft buzz of the parking lot lights. There are no tricks in a prenup, she said. But Claire didn't need one. I frowned. What do you mean? She already owns part of the company. My blood froze in my veins. What? She used a front man. Some guy named Julian Wexler, a clean record, a little-known investor from Denver, supposedly owns a stake in Raines Holdings through a private shell group called Foresight LLC. I traced the origin of the capital. It comes from a fund run by Claire's former employer before she met Roman, a boutique investment firm that no longer exists. I scrolled through the PDFs Nina had put together, transaction histories, digital breadcrumbs, disguised fund transfers. She bought the company, I whispered, before we were married. She played the long game for years, Nina said. The affair wasn't the ending, it was her entrance. I stared at the screen. Claire had used an intermediary, Wexler, to inject quiet capital into Rain's engineering just as I was being promoted to vice president. She didn't just marry Roman to get closer to power. She invested in the family business with a plan to run it, to take it over. She was never just a wife, I muttered. She was a plant. She had a strategy. And when Roman became CEO, she got access to all the financial arteries of the company. She didn't just want to sleep with the king. She wanted to be the queen. After a month of time, Nina sat across from me with her laptop open and a look that said I found the monster hiding within your walls. She's good, Nina said. Very good. It took everything I had not to fall for the clean surface. I leaned forward. Tell me about her. There's nothing in her name, no connection to Rain's holdings. No signatures that can be traced. No obvious shell corporations. But what it does have is a structure. Nina turned the screen to me. There are 7 companies, she said, each registered in a different state, each with completely different names and industries. From tech consulting in Vermont to a logistics subcontractor in Ohio. Small. Dangerous. But they all have one thing in common. She tapped the screen. Each owns exactly 1.7% to 3.4% of Rain's Engineering's diversified private investment pool, uncontrolled, unaccountable stakes scattered across our network of assets. But together, they make up almost 15% of the company's private portfolio. I stared at the web of logos and LLC names connected by thin lines on the digital chart. She had built it like a spider spinning threads in the dark. Let me guess, I said. All of this is funded by a central trust? Claire's old trust fund, Nina confirmed. Filtered through a dead venture capital firm and a series of non-existent holding companies. The money is clean. Fingerprints are buried. She handed me a printed sheet. But the beneficiary is registered in all 7 companies? I looked down. Claire Rains. In small, handwritten transfer agreements and hidden operating charters, she had quietly taken over each of the puppet firms through a slow takeover. Not enough to raise eyebrows alone. But together, she owned a larger share of the company than any of the Rainses except Thomas himself. How is this possible? How could we let this happen? I muttered. She didn't want influence, Nina said. She wanted to own the company. She used Roman to gain trust. She used Thomas for access. And she bought her way into our legacy through the shadows. She was building this before she even married Roman, Nina said quietly. She didn't just want to marry him, I whispered. She wanted to build it from the inside out. It took Nina almost a month. For weeks of immersion in federal records, state documents, tax loopholes, and hidden property information. She said it was one of the most time-consuming deep dives she had ever done, and she had previously worked for the Bureau on Fraud Investigations. Looking at the network Claire built, carefully, coldly, patiently. I underestimated her. Claire didn't just marry into the Rains family. She orchestrated a hostile takeover in slow motion. She's been planning this for years, I muttered. Even before the wedding, Nina said. Maybe even before she met Roman. She handed me a paper, a hand-signed operating agreement for the last of the shell companies, buried deep in an appendix. And there it was. The beneficiary, Claire Rains. Recorded under a pseudonym, verified by handwriting, and linked to a notary public known to have ties to one of her dormant companies. Claire was betting that we were all too proud, too arrogant, too blind to see what she was really doing. And for a while, she was right. But not anymore. The courtroom smelled of old carpet and polished wood. It was a place that had seen too many apologies and not enough justice. Claire sat across from us in a navy blue suit and pearl earrings, her expression unreadable, her arms folded as if she were the plaintiff, not the defendant. Her eyes scanned us with the same quiet condescension, as if it were all a formality, as if she still had cards to play. But not this time. This time, we had stacked the deck. It took months to get here. Months of investigations, subpoenas, private depositions, and forensic accounting that exposed the web she had spun to infiltrate Rain's engineering and holdings. But nothing struck a bigger blow than a clause hidden in our company's founding documents, so old, so rarely mentioned, that it was almost forgotten. Until I found it. Clause 9C, Protocol for the Protection of Property Rights. No person or entity may own more than 10% of the total number of private shares of the company unless approved by a majority vote of the board of directors. Violation renders the said shares invalid and unenforceable, and the investor is subject to immediate confiscation and civil liability. She never saw this coming. She hid behind her shell companies. She thought that dividing the investment into smaller shares among a dozen front companies would protect her. But one by one, Nina and the firm's lawyers proved that each LLC, each independent investor, had its origins in the same source. We had paper trails. We had the same routes of telegraph calls, similar signatures. We even got a disgruntled former lawyer for one of Claire's early businesses to testify that she was the sole beneficiary of all the holding company accounts. When the judge leaned forward and asked, "Are you arguing that these companies were created with the intent to circumvent Section 9C?" Our attorney, Ms. Harper, answered without flinching. "Not only do we allege that these companies were created with the intent to circumvent paragraph 9C. We not only allege it, Your Honor, we can prove it." Claire didn't flinch either. At first, she didn't. But I saw her blink once, slowly. A tiny crack in the porcelain. The judge looked at the contracts, the exhibits, the tangled web of Claire's financial deception. The court was silent. And then, just like that, the court finds the defendant in violation of the corporate capital and shareholder governance laws as set forth in the Articles of Incorporation of Raines Engineering and Holdings. The court orders the complete cancellation of its share and the return of corporate control to the board of directors. The defendant should also be held accountable for the betrayal of her family life and the defamed name of her husband and the Raines family company. It was done. Claire Raines was erased, not only from the company, but also from the legal history of its ownership. Her shares were canceled. Her influence has been canceled. Her name had been erased from all partnership documents. As she stood, gathering her things with forced poise, her eyes finally met mine. There was no anger, only cold, bitter calculation. She nodded, almost as if she wanted to say, "I'll be smarter next time." I didn't blink. There would be no next time. Later that week, Roman and I were sitting in the Raines conference room, now just two men in sharp suits who had climbed out of the rubble together. We had restored the company's reputation. Investors were reassured. The board of directors voted to restore our original corporate charter, and I officially took over as COO, while Roman remained CEO. We were stable, but not completely. Not yet, because there was still a ghost roaming around outside the walls. Thomas Raines, our father. Roman hadn't spoken to him since the accident, not even when Thomas tried to send an email titled, "For the Good of the Company." He left it unread. But I knew that we couldn't just forget the man who built this empire and almost buried it under his own ego. We had to put an end to it. And closure required confrontation. Roman did not want to leave. He hated the idea. But in the end, he agreed because, like me, he realized that some wounds will never close until the blade is pulled out all the way. The last meeting. It was already getting dark when we arrived at the old Raines estate, our childhood home, now quiet and mostly locked. Thomas opened the door himself. He looked thin. He looked gray. His usual air of dominance had been replaced by something more relaxed. Not humility, something firmer. A submissiveness. "Marcus." "Roman," he said, stepping aside. We entered without speaking. He led us to an office. An office with old maps on the walls and a fireplace in front of which he had lectured us. The one where he taught us to read contracts before teaching us to drive. He poured whiskey. 2 glasses. Not 3. "I don't think you'll be long," he said. "No," Roman answered categorically. Thomas nodded. He looked at us like a man who had nothing left to gamble with. "You have made this company stronger than I thought," he said. "You turned your pain into steel. I taught you that, even if I didn't want to." Roman was still silent. "You betrayed us both," I said. "You gave her matches and told her where the gasoline was." "I thought I was controlling her," he said. I leaned forward, my voice sharp. "You were preparing your own daughter-in-law to become your private asset. You weren't protecting the company, you were infecting it." He did not look away. "I will not apologize," he said. "But I will say this. I'm glad you won. To both of you." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a faded envelope. He slid it toward us. Roman stared at it, but did not touch it. "What is it?" "My shares," Thomas said. My last voice. My silence, in writing. "I'm stepping down. Officially. For good." "You should have done this years ago," Roman whispered. Thomas looked at his younger son with a kind of shattered pride. "You hated me more than Marcus. That's why I knew you would be the one to put an end to it." Roman stood up. "You are no longer a part of this family's future," I said. And whatever your name means, you have dishonored it yourself. You taught us family values, but you have shown yourself to be the one who trampled on them. Thomas nodded. Fair enough. We turned to leave. In the doorway, Roman stopped, just for a moment. Then, without looking back, he said, "The next time someone tries to buy a place in our family, I will see it." I didn't have to look to realize that Thomas was crying. The door closed behind us, and the house that had raised us was finally behind us, too.